question. How many Insecure fans do we have in the building? Okay. Anybody been rocking with Issa Rae and watching Awkward Black Girl since early? That YouTube series still hits, believe me. So we all know Issa as an actress, a writer, producer, and entertainer, but she's a certified media mogul. She's honestly media's current reigning queen. And we're gonna find out exactly how she built this empire. Are y'all ready for Issa Rae? So give it up for actress, writer, producer, New York Times best-selling author, and certified media mogul, Issa Rae!
Hello. Thank you guys so much for having me. Thank you for the introduction.
Absolutely. 20,000 people, Issa.
This is incredible. I mean, it's not for me, but this is amazing.
No, it's definitely here for you because, like I said in the introduction, what you've been doing, not just in the Hollywood space, but in business is phenomenal. Like, you're our Oprah. You are literally our Oprah Winfrey of this generation. You've been doing so much, and we're going to take it in step by step, brick by brick, because we're going to talk about the wine. We're going to talk about Color Creative, the talent management company. You have so much. And that's why the world sees you as both a creative genius and a boss. How do you balance being a creator while operating multiple businesses? Because I know, like me as a creative, that's one side. Like, I can do marketing, I can create, but like the business side, sometimes some of us struggle with that. How do you balance?
Well, first of all, thank you for all that. I don't want Oprah to hear that and be like, bitch, you could never. So let me just chill on that. But I appreciate that. And she's such an inspiration for me. For the, as far as like the creative and business side, a lot of that came from creating on the internet. You know, I started, for those who don't know, with a web series called Awkward Black Girl, and that was like, thank you. That was huge for me in terms of, one, exercising my creativity in terms of trying to put out what I didn't see, what I wanted to see on television. And then anybody who's an online creator knows you're not just making things. You have to be your own marketer. You have to produce your own things. You have to hustle to try to get money for your series. And so involuntarily, like, I was like, I just want to tell these stories, but now I have to be a businesswoman to keep this afloat. And that transferred into television. A lot of people don't know that when you're running a show, and I was really fortunate to have a mentor in Prentice Penny, who was the actual showrunner of Insecure. But every time you have a TV show, that's like a mini business. You know, you have at least 100 people, 200 people working for your production, and that's from start to finish. And so it really is a mini business that you're running. And so I learned a lot from the business side of the internet and the business side of television, and organically things started to expand from there.
So what's sort of like the difference between Issa the creative and Issa the businesswoman? Because like, we love your personality, the humor. Do you show up sort of differently when it comes to business meetings and anything that has to do with that space?
I show up as a listener, but no, I show up as myself in most spaces. Yeah, in all spaces. I don't really know how to not do that. I just don't act like I know more than I do. Anytime I show up to any kind of business meeting, I know what I bring to the table, and I know what my expertise is, and I'm very, very aware of what I don't know. And so I don't show up like dictating things. I show up listening, and unless it's something that I'm spearheading or a creative project is concerned, that's where I'm like, oh, I'm in my bag, and I know that I'm very, very particular about the creative side of things and how that's kind of projected.
I know, it was a few years ago when you declared you were in your mogul era, right? And you brought that into fruition because you launched Color Creative, a talent management company that supports diverse creatives and inclusive content. You have Radio, a music label and audio company that does everything from music supervision and publishing to podcasts and events. You also have your own Prosecco wine, Viva Ray, and you're the co-owner of multiple coffee shops, a restaurant, and a hair care line. Issa don't sleep. Issa don't sleep. My question for you is, what do you love most about building companies, and what's the most challenging part of that?
I love collaborating with capable partners. So, those are everything that you named. I'm working with incredible people. They're all collaborations, and they all literally happened organically, and they're an interest. Like, I don't like to do anything just cause or just cause I can. Make no mistake, sometimes when people are like, well, why are you doing all this? And it's just like, well, why not? But it's also because I genuinely want to, and I have a genuine interest. But my favorite part is, like I said, the people that I work with, and again, how organic all of this has happened. So even with Insecure, one of the things that was big for me was the music, and the curation of the music there. That was, I had a huge part in that, and worked with an incredible music supervisor, Kier Lehman, and as that progressed, there was an opportunity to, people were constantly on labels, on the label side, they were approaching me about being an artist, and I was like, yo,
a rapper.
Yeah, and I was like, yo, watch the show. She can't. She's not a good rapper. I don't. That's not the career I want. And then one of the labels was like, well, what if you had a label just because you have so much artist discovery on the show? And I was like, oh, that's interesting, because we're kind of doing that on the management company side with up-and-coming writers, and that was also another organic tie-in. But if I had a label that tied into the music supervision, and we could work with writers, and so that made sense. And so radio, our music division was born from that. And now, we music supervise shows that aren't ours on all different networks, and work with a lot of writers and creators on the music side, and that's great. And then something like a coffee shop was born out of me writing in coffee shops, and as opposed to starting it myself, which is what I wanted to do initially, I talked to my business manager and told him, like, I want a coffee shop. And I told him really early on, in my Awkward Black Girl days, when I got a little book check, I was like, like, one of my dreams is I really want to open a coffee shop in my neighborhood. And he was like, okay, I'm noting that. And I was like, okay, cool. And then a couple years later, I got Insecure, and I was like, you see my money up. So, like, what's up? Like, I want this coffee shop. And he's like, well, your money's not that up, but
wait a minute.
I remember that. I'm on it, trust. And I was like, great. And then a couple seasons rolled, and I was like, what's up? Like, I really want this coffee shop. What's happening? And he was like, sis, who gonna grind the beans? And I was like, that's an excellent point. And he was like, I'm trying to find you the partners to make this happen, because you're doing a lot of, you're not gonna be there. And I was like, that's true. And so he found me these incredible partners who had just opened a coffee shop in my neighborhood, AJ and Yoni. And then we were able to expand to Inglewood together, and now we have the 4 coffee shops that you named.
Shout out to Inglewood in the building.
But hey, shout out to Inglewood for sure. But every piece has been connected to someone else, and me not being foolish enough to think that I can undertake it on my own.
So how do you know who to partner with? Who's a good person? Because when people see Issa Rae, they see a money bag, right? And sometimes people don't always have good intentions. How do you know who I can even partner with?
That's a great question. I tend to think I'm a good judge of character, but I spoke earlier about knowing what I bring to the table, but also recognizing what other people bring to the table. And it's funny you should say that. Even in the coffee shop dating, before I met my original partners, there was another woman that I wanted to partner with who was opening a coffee shop, and, approached her about collaborating, and she was concerned. And she was like, I've been building this for a while, and I don't want people to just, if you join, call this Issa's coffee shop and overshadow the work. And I was like, I get that. Like, you've been putting in the work, no problem. Like, I'm big on credit and giving people credit, but completely understand. And so I dated the new partners and was very clear. I was like, look, I know how much work y'all put into the first coffee shop. I'm not trying to take you guys this credit by any means. I just want to warn you guys, like, if we do partner, people are going to think that this is all me. And they were like, we do not care. That is great. Like, whatever works for the business. And so it was kind of just like they were egoless on my side. I try to be egoless on mine. And we have to understand, like, I recognize that you guys are the brains, and you recognize that I have the marketing capabilities and whatever else I bring to the table. And so starting there and putting egos aside is so important to me. And sometimes we get wrapped up in minor things that could dissolve a relationship before it even starts. And so I try to look for those red flags in anybody that I speak to. People who are kind of rigid in their visions. I can be stubborn, I can be hard-headed, but I also, like I said, always know what I don't know and have to be transparent about what I don't know. And there's some people who, their way is their way. And you can see that early on, and they'll show you that early on. And it's really, though that comes from hard lessons that I've learned from partnerships that haven't worked. And so it really just is about being intentional and dating and not jumping into a partnership just because you think you know someone familiarly. You might know someone on a friendship level and not on a business level. And those are very, very different relationships.
I learned that one.
Yeah. Sorry, girl. I know that life too.
So, you mentioned briefly about just the work you've been doing to champion voices and the work of both diverse and unknown creatives of color. You put a lot of people on. You give a lot of people their chance. That said, how do you tell stories that generate revenue but still remain true, still don't compromise creative integrity?
Woo. As a creator, I start with what I want to see first, and I have a small audience of people in mind. I think about my family and friends. Like, will they like this? They are my core audience that I see in my head. If I think bigger than that, I get overwhelmed and it doesn't feel authentic. So anytime I write something, I'm just like, what would they think? Would they appreciate this? Would they laugh? Does this feel real and true to me and them? And I think I got lucky timing-wise that was appreciated by the industry by the time, I was ready for a television show and to work and to build. Now it does feel like we have, as an industry, there's more of a prioritization of a broad appeal and trying to make sure that it speaks to as many people as possible. And the universal specificity isn't as appreciated as much, and we'll likely revert to that. The industry moves in cycles, just like fashion moves in cycles, and it feels like we're going through yet another dearth of Black creatives and other creatives of color having an opportunity to tell very specific stories and authentic stories. But that's always going to be my focus. It's just not. A lot of those stories aren't sellable right now, but that doesn't mean that I prioritize them any less. And so it's been about trying to pivot and repackage how we tell these stories and repackage how we're able to show studios and these models that you're still going to reach this audience. Like, we just had a movie, One of Them Days, that just came out earlier in January. Thank you all, starring SZA and Keke Palmer. And even that process, that was a process. We were working on that movie for 7 years, like starting in the lab with the writer, Sarita Singleton, and where there was initially a desire to tell this story at the time. It was like 2018, 2019. There was a strong desire to have a movie like that. It was smaller, and they didn't care about the appeal. But once it became theatrical, they were like, and Keke had signed on. And, this was pre-Nope. And so it was so exciting to have her on board. And then once Nope hit, she hit a different level. But for that second actress, the studio was like, we need a global superstar for this to have mass appeal. And we were like, God dang, global superstar, what the fuck? And so they were throwing names out there. And some of the names didn't fit. And, their job is to make it theatrical, and theatrical to them means global. And so they threw out SZA ultimately, and I was like, oh, that's actually really interesting, but I don't know if she would do something like this. And then she said yes, and that was how we were able to kind of package that movie and convince the studio ultimately to say yes after 7 years. This is the project that we want to make and put out. And so there are constantly these hurdles for our stories to be told ultimately, and this paid off in a big way, literally. You know, it made them $50 million, and that was...
Clap it up for that.
And that was something that, you know, we hadn't had comedies in theaters for a while, and that helped to revitalize. And I knew that would be the conversation too. Like anytime comedies or something's not selling, the studio's saying it's not gonna work, then, you know, you have something successful and they're like, oh, it works. And people wanna see it. And so I feel like that's constantly my job at the end of the day. And I love proving that, you know. There aren't awkward black girls on TV because nobody wants to see it. I'll show you. There aren't, you know, there isn't this archetype. There isn't comedies playing in theaters. I just want to fill those voids ultimately, and that excites me.
And you do an amazing job of that.
Thank you.
By the way, paving the way. And I'm glad that you mentioned one of them days made $50 million. My question for you, Issa, is what happens when a project that you produce and invest in doesn't hit its metrics of success, doesn't meet those profit margins? What happens?
It gets canceled. Shit. We had a show that I love to this day, Rap Shit, that was on...
Yes.
Yeah.
Play y'all.
That was on HBO Max, and that was, you know, our executives really believed in the project, and it's so interesting, and I talk about timing. You know, Insecure, when that came out, my dream home has always been to write and create for HBO, and I love them as a network because they were always writer-friendly, creator-friendly, and as a viewer, I witnessed that. I witnessed so many incredible shows, and I was like, I want to be there. And so when I got the opportunity for Insecure and we started airing, I remember the first week, because they'll send you ratings every Tuesday. And the first week after our pilot aired, I saw our ratings and I was like, oh shit, oh no, this is over for us. Like these numbers aren't shit. And then the president of the company was like, this is great, we're only gonna build from here. And I was like, this is incredible. Like, they're giving us the space to grow, and over 5 seasons, we did, you know, and they had faith in us. They put us after Game of Thrones for season 2, and we blew up after that, and that was the faith of the network. And then for Rap Shit, I thought we'd have that same courtesy, because it is a courtesy at the end of the day. But the business changed exactly at that time. So where Max was expanding, the metrics and expectations of metrics changed. So it changed from streamers valuing viewers and the subscription model to like being focused on more eyeballs and just money, like the revenue. And subscription, it changed to valuing subscriptions. And so that changed the game because they were just like, we need numbers and we need people signing up for the platform. And so you didn't get that same chance to grow and build your audience. And it felt like we were just on the cusp of post-season 2, more awareness around the show. And then, you know, they were like, numbers-wise, it's just not hitting where we want to be, and we're shifting our focus. And then they changed the branding and all that. So we were kind of a casualty of that, but you just kind of got to keep it pushing. And it was just about meeting about, okay, well, what are you guys looking for? What do you want? What is the slate? But it's devastating, and you just have to be able to pivot and be an adult about recognizing that ultimately this is show business, and if the business is a business thing, then you got to figure it out.
You know, speaking of the business of storytelling, how many storytellers do we have in here in the building? Any creator storytellers? So there's a lot of us here, Issa, and I wanted to talk about how the business of storytelling has changed since Awkward Black Girl. You know, you talked about some of those metrics. You talked about what studios are really putting pressure on creators like yourself to do and to really push. Can you just take a deep dive into that a little bit?
Well, I mean, again, we kind of talked about this backstage, but the industry the Hollywood just isn't the same at all anymore. You know, people aren't going to the theaters as much, and that makes executives and studios feel like they have to mine IP, they have to mine nostalgia, and make sure that there's they're having a reason for people to go to the theaters. And they think that reason is stuff that we've seen before, stuff that we're attached to. And anytime they try something original and it's not successful, it just affirms in their mind that that they can't take a chance on creators. They can't take a chance on new material. So even as consumers, we have a responsibility literally to support the things that we want to see. And when we see original things and we're like, that could have been on Netflix, like, what am I going to the theater for? Then that matters too. Then it's like that gives the one creator who probably spent 5 to 10 years of their life trying to get this to the screen, it kind of dismisses that work. And there is a huge difference. And then of course, AI has changed a lot of the industry because it's made things significantly cheaper. So if I'm a studio, and there's no regulation yet, there's no proper regulation, it's slow to catch up to you know, actually having consequences for feeding people scripts and again, taking jobs. There's no metrics or there's no mandates, I should say, for like a minimum of crew to even be on a project. If there were mandates where it's like, okay, AI can do this much work, but you still have to employ real people for these jobs to make sure that the economy is thriving, then that would make a huge difference, but no one is doing that yet. And if studios work together, if agencies work together, that could possibly happen. But until then, we're kind of all failing and everybody's just trying to figure it out in these silos, and we're not organized against the industry, and ultimately that'll kill it.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up AI because those Google Vivo 3 videos, did y'all see those videos? They look so good. They dropped like a few months ago, and they basically look like studio-produced mini-films that it didn't require a writer, it didn't require a studio, it didn't require manpower, it didn't require a budget. So basically, anyone with a subscription can create studio-level quality using this AI. And to your point, Issa, where is the AI pulling this information from? It's from creatives like yourself who've been putting out all of this creative material onto the internet. So I wanted to get your take on that, the disruption of AI in Hollywood. How does that make you feel as a creator? What are some of the pros and the cons?
I mean, the cons you just listed, it's just people have worked so hard to create culture, and that's and it literally is their hard-earned work that's been used to train these models, and they don't get any credit for it, and that's painful. And the cons also are that there are no regulation. I'm like, who is in charge of this, and why is it taking so long? And it's just, by the time y'all catch up, it'll be too late. The industry will be dead. But the pros are, these are really, really effective tools. Like, they are really, really helpful, and used the right way, they can enhance the creative process, they can make things seamless, and you can produce quicker. There's just no denying the benefits and advantages of it. I guess where I'm most scared is, like, you mentioned some of the videos, but like, the scariest thing I saw was something someone shared of me where it was like just a regular man on the street that was set in Lagos, and a guy was like, why is Lagos the best? And a woman, he's interviewing a woman, and she laughs like, Lagos is just, and she laughs, and he's like, your laugh. And I was like, okay, this is random. And my friend was like, this is all AI generated. Like, none of these people are real. And I was like, what the? And I couldn't tell this time.
Can't tell. You can't tell.
And my fear is no one caring. No one, it's already annoying when you'll see like a sound bite or a headline taken and people just read that and they're like, well, I know what it is. And then when it's corrected, far few people see the correction, and far few people care. Like, just like, I saw something, I don't want to give my good sis again, but someone said something about, like, even Tracy Ellis for her show. Like, I saw something go viral where it was like, I don't even want to repeat what it was, but it was wrong information. And I was like, girl, I know this is not true. I saw the documentary. She was like, no, it was a headline and they took it out of context and more damage had been done. And when the correction came out, people were like, well, I still think what I think. She's still nasty. Like, I'm like, dang. So imagine like having the video proof of something and not being able to dispel it. And that terrifies me on a larger level.
Because seeing is believing, right? And I've seen those videos too where it looks like real actors engaging and going into buildings and it's blowing up and it's like this was all AI. But I'm glad you talked about the lack of regulation because Google and OpenAI are lobbying the federal government now to designate copyrighted art, movies, TV, and film as fair use so that they can use that to train AI. That said, Issa, how can creatives protect their intellectual property if they have free range, if AI companies have free range to just take whatever you put on the internet, they take that and they use it to train a model and make millions?
It's in the contracts, honestly. It's in the contracts that you sign before you create a project now. Unfortunately, unless you can renegotiate or you can kind of go back and decide, like, if you're going to print. For example, one of the things that came about was, like, a bunch of authors found out their books were used to train AI, and they tried to sue, and that would, like you said, it was ruled that this was fair use. But now book publishing companies, and I've seen it from my own book, are like, this book can legally not be used to train AI models. And so you can do that with your scripts. You can use that, and that, like, that will legally hold up because it's explicitly stated, and that's not fair use. But I don't know how to protect against that retroactively. It's just
So it's only moving forward.
It'd be the moving forward of it. But again, I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not part of Congress. I'm not part of these systems that are built to protect us. So I don't know how fast we can build the models to regulate retroactively, but moving forward, there's an opportunity to do so.
And that's why it's so important, especially the entrepreneurs in the building, get legal representation, read every contract, because you never know where and how your intellectual property can be used. And I'm glad you mentioned books and publishing, because you have a new book that's dropping August 26th. I should be smarter by now. Question for you, what has been your biggest misstep or mistake in business that made you smarter?
That made me smarter. Hopefully every mistake that I made has made me smarter in some way, because I know that I'm not going to make that same mistake again. I don't make the same mistakes twice. But one of the biggest, worst investments, and it wasn't the worst investment because it paid out in the long run. It ultimately launched my management company, but I did what they tell investors not to do. And I spent all my money trying to launch this venture called Color Creative, which is now our management company. But at the time, it was an independent TV model. I was trying to replicate the Awkward Black Girl model, where you create something, audiences get excited about it. You create something, you put it online, audiences get excited about it, and networks come to you and you can sell it. So I was like, we should do that with the creation of TV pilots, and it was inspired by the same writer I met from who wrote One of Them Days. She had sent me a script of a TV pilot, and I was like, damn, this is so good. I want to watch this, and I feel like if other people saw it, they would want to see this be a TV show too. And initially had investors, and I talk about this in the book, investors sign up. One of them was an ex. Don't ask an ex to invest in anything. And ultimately, like, I had decided, because we'd found 3 other pilots, I talked to my producing partner at the time, Denise, and I was like, what's the cheapest we could produce pilots for? And she was like, I think the cheapest, while still being union certified, is like $50,000. And I was like, okay, so what if we did 3? And she was like, we can make that happen for $150,000. We can raise, we can go to networks, and maybe they would sponsor it. And so I had the idea, and I'm very impulsive. and was like, we got to do this now, figure it out. I know that we can get money from this thing, and eventually this money will come in. And long story short, in the middle of shooting our second pilot, my business manager was like, what did you do? And I was like, what you mean? He was like, you don't have all your money that you've ever earned is gone, and it's only gonna keep going. Like, what's going on? And I was like, well, I was supposed to have money coming in, and we're kind of already in it, and I couldn't tell these writers no, and I figured it was gonna come. And it was just a huge mistake, but I didn't want to let these writers down whose work I believe in, just be like, psych, we're not shooting your project anymore. And I genuinely believed, like, once people saw the product, the money would come back. But it was one of those things where I literally spent every cent I had ever earned. And this was pre-Insecure. This was right after my first book came out. So I was like, I have a little check. But it was I ended up spending literally every penny on these pilots. And thankfully I hadn't gotten all the book advance yet, but I was like calling my manager, like, can they just give me, I know I haven't finished the book, can they give me the money still now so that I could buy groceries? And they did. Shout out to Dawn Davis, who was a Black woman publishing my book. Love her to death, and that helped. But it was a huge mistake, and obviously it sounds obvious, but you shouldn't spend money you don't have, and you should have a plan. But ultimately, it ended up being an incubator. Like I said, we found that writer who, ultimately came on to write with me for Insecure. She show ran Rap Shit. She wrote One of the Days. She's working on another movie for us now. Another one of those projects was from a producer who's now on Abbott Elementary. And then, it was really a talent incubator, and we were able to get them signed to networks and the like. So it ended up paying off, but it was a terrible mistake at the time.
But you learned from it.
Yeah, I'm not doing that ever again.
Right? And we understand why. But Color Creative, which you mentioned, that the management and production company that empowers underrepresented creatives, it reportedly doubled its revenue from 2023 to 2024. So you're doing something right. You're doing a lot of things right.
Again, we have incredible leadership. That Color Creative is run by our president, Talitha Watkins, and she's been just instrumental in leading that management company. And we're really excited that Harborview came on to invest in the company. So that was huge for us.
Harborview Equity Partners, shout out, also another Black woman-owned equity firm. You guys partner with them. You plan to expand. I read in a press release that you guys have sites overseas.
Absolutely. We want to expand internationally. We have sites there. That's always been a goal, specifically in Africa and, the Caribbean, and just really trying to figure out where we can have an imprint there. But being able to get an investment and still stay Black female owned was huge for us.
What opportunities are you seeing right now in Africa?
Yeah, it's endless, and it's exciting to see. Even when I was in Senegal a couple of years ago, it feels like there's such visibility. Well, one, people want to get the fuck up out of here, so that's also incredible.
Understandably so.
Yeah. However you feel, you might want to leave, and there's an opportunity in so many of these places to grow and build, and sometimes we don't know it until we visit and we see it. And so I've seen so many incredible things developing in Dakar and the outskirts in Senegal, and in Ghana and Nigeria. And a lot of these streamers are beating independent companies to it. So it's kind of like, why let them be the first? Why not have them tap you to build the infrastructure? Because a lot of these places don't have the infrastructure for filming yet, and there's so many opportunities to create pipelines and to be the first. And there's a thriving industry in Nollywood and the like, but it hasn't necessarily gone mainstream yet. So how can you be responsible for that? So the opportunities are really endless, and it just excites me, especially if you speak multiple languages, which is that's also kind of an underrated flex.
Absolutely, Issa. And I know we're running out of time, but to this room full of entrepreneurs and creatives, What advice would you share or leave with all of us when it comes to not just creating, because you have to create content to survive as a business owner. Everything lives on social media, obviously, today's date and today's age. What advice would you leave all of us with when it comes to building sustainable businesses, whether it's in entertainment or using creative equity in order to build a business?
I'm so big on finding those right partners, and being in rooms like these is just invaluable. Like the number of people don't really believe me, but so many of the people that I've met have just been from mutual connections, from rooms like these, from just like, again, dating people to collaborate with down the line, and they've been such fruitful partnerships. I can't overstate that enough, of just like your future co-founder, your future billionaire buddy could be in this room. So make the most of that, and also constantly just think about what no one else is doing. I think what's kind of what it kind of bums me out about this culture of content right now is so much of it is just based off of creating what's already been created, and not thinking about like what the new is, what the void is. And the sooner we get back to that, the more our culture will benefit from it. So, I'm trusting y'all to do it.
Absolutely, Issa. I know we have to run real quick, 30 seconds or less. When you mentioned you talked to your ex to invest in one of your businesses, what advice, real quick, 30 seconds? Because, at least you knew him, right? But should we be working with people that we know intimately or have a relationship with?
No, that was so stupid. Like, he pulled out, so, whoa. You said 30 seconds or less, so.
I appreciate that. Give it up, y'all, for Issa Rae.
Selena Hill and Issa Rae.
It's all white.
Do y'all see all this greatness?